It's 2 a.m., you're lying in bed, and your brain decides now is the perfect time to replay that conversation from 6 years ago. You didn't choose this. You were just trying to sleep. This feels random, but it isn't. Because at night, your brain actually becomes a different kind of thinking machine. Not a worse one. A different one with different rules. Wait, what does that even mean? It means the version of your brain that shows up at 2 a.m. isn't malfunctioning. It's running exactly the way it's built to run once the sun goes down. The problem is nobody warned you about the switch. Let's start with what's physically happening inside your skull right now. During the day, a region called the prefrontal cortex sits at the front of your brain like a calm, rational manager. It's the part that says that's not worth worrying about, or you already solved that problem. It keeps your emotional reactions in check. At night, that manager clocks out early. In 2007, sleep researcher Matthew Walker and his colleagues at UC Berkeley ran brain scans on people after a full night of sleep deprivation. What they found was striking. The connection between the prefrontal cortex and a deeper brain structure called the amygdala, the part responsible for fear, threat, and emotional intensity, weakened dramatically. Without that connection, the amygdala doesn't get supervised properly. And in their study, emotional reactivity spiked by roughly 60%. 60% more intensity, same thoughts, same memories, just far less filtering. That's why a thought that felt manageable at noon can feel unbearable at midnight. It's not a new problem. It's an old problem, finally unsupervised. Is something wrong with you? No, your manager just went home. And the parts of your brain that are left in charge are the ones that specialize in worst case scenarios. But there's a second piece to this puzzle, and it explains why the thoughts don't just feel intense, they loop. You've probably noticed this. One thought becomes 10 thoughts. The awkward thing you said in a meeting turns into a spiral about your entire career. A single worry about tomorrow expands into a worry about everything you haven't done in the last 5 years. Psychologist Susan Nolan-Huxema spent decades researching this pattern. She called it rumination, the tendency to replay negative thoughts over and over without reaching any resolution. Her research found something counterintuitive. People often ruminate because it feels productive. Like if you just think about the problem hard enough, you'll solve it. But her study showed the opposite happens. Rumination doesn't lead to solutions. It leads to more rumination. It's a loop that generates more of itself, not less. And nighttime is the perfect environment for that loop to run undisturbed. During the day, you're interrupted constantly. A text, a task, a conversation. Every interruption breaks the loop before it can build momentum. At night, there's nothing left to interrupt it. No task to switch to, no phone call to take. Just you, a dark room, and a brain that finally has uninterrupted time to spiral. You didn't create the perfect conditions for overthinking on purpose. Silence and stillness just happen to be exactly what a rumination loop needs to survive. Here's where it gets even stranger. Your body's also working against you chemically. Cortisol, the hormone associated with stress and alertness, naturally follows a rhythm throughout the day. It's supposed to drop as you approach sleep. But if you're anxious, wired, or carrying unresolved stress from the day, that drop doesn't happen cleanly. Your body stays partially alert while your surroundings go quiet. That mismatch, an alert body in a silent room, is fertile ground for your mind to go looking for something to focus that alertness on. And it usually finds something. An email you didn't send, a relationship you're worried about, a version of tomorrow that hasn't happened yet. None of this means you're broken or anxious in some permanent defining way. It means your biology and your environment are lining up in a very specific, very common way at a very specific hour. So why does 2 a.m. feel like the peak? Sleep researchers have found that in a typical night, cortisol and core body temperature hit some of their lowest points in the early hours of the morning, right around when melatonin is highest and alertness should be lowest. For people who are already anxious or under stress, this window is also when unresolved cognitive activity tends to surface most vividly. Your brain has nothing else competing for its attention, so the backlog gets first billing. You've probably blamed yourself for this, told yourself you're too anxious, too dramatic, too much in your head, but you didn't build this system. It's the same system every human being carries: a prefrontal cortex that quiets down at night, an amygdala that gets less supervision, and a rumination loop that thrives in silence. So what actually helps? Not just don't think about it. That almost never works, and researchers know why. Trying to suppress a thought usually makes it louder. A well-documented effect, sometimes called the rebound effect of thought suppression. What tends to work instead is something psychologist Thomas Borkovich studied for treating chronic worry: giving the thought somewhere else to go, setting aside a specific time earlier in the day, not at 2 a.m., to actually sit with the worry on paper, writing it down, giving your brain permission to return to it later at a scheduled time, instead of right now in the dark. That single shift from solve this immediately to you have a scheduled time for this reduces the urgency your brain assigns to the thought. It tells your amygdala this isn't a fire that needs putting out this second. It can wait until morning when your prefrontal cortex clocks back in. Tonight, when it's 2 a.m. and your brain pulls up a memory from 6 years ago, you'll know what's actually happening. Your manager stepped out, your amygdala is running the show, and the silence around you is the exact environment your mind needs to keep looping. You're not overthinking because something is wrong with you. You're overthinking because for a few hours every night, your brain runs without the one part of it built to say, that's enough for now. And tomorrow, when the sun comes up and that same thought suddenly feels smaller, you'll know why.